From hopeless continent to rising Africa, the continent of Africa and African people have been exploring ways to develop itself. And also, it has been reaching out to the rest of the world, particularly China. China-Africa cooperation expands to public health, education, and services from just manufacturing. But of course, we know COVID-19 changed the global context and also brought challenges to African and Chinese. So what are the new difficulties facing China and Africa cooperation? What has COVID changed in Africa and in China? And what will be the possibility of collaboration between China and Africa in the post-COVID era? I'm very honored to be joined by some distinguished guests today to talk about these issues. Let me introduce them to you. His Excellency, Mr. Toshimi Toga Chanaka, Ethiopian Ambassador to China. Welcome, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you.
His Excellency James Kimonyo, Rwanda Ambassador to China. Welcome, Ambassador. And Dr. Babatunde Ahonsi, UN Resident Coordinator. Welcome, Mr. Ahonsi.
Glad to be here.
And Ms. He Wenping, Senior Research Fellow of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Ms. He, welcome.
Thank you.
Leslie Marsdorp, Vice President and CFO of New Development Bank. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you.
And Jeremy Stevens, Chief China Economist at Standard Bank in Beijing. Stephen.
Hey.
Before we delve into our discussions, let's take a look at a short video detailing China-Africa cooperation so far.
In 2020, we explore the new relationship between China and Africa. Global health is a top priority. In what ways can China and Africa work together in public health management? New economic growth becomes urgent. Food security concerns everybody. Transformation of manufacturing and industry is a necessity. How can cooperation promote bilateral development and meet local needs? Diversity is beautiful, but needs understanding. How can we share distinct cultures with creativity? Discover a different Africa in the CGTN think tank's special China-Africa Forum.
So we've seen some very inspiring pictures for Africa and African people. The concept of African century was actually raised by African leaders in the 1990s, and we have seen rapid development of the continent in the first 10 years of this century. But COVID-19 obviously it could be a disruptor. In what way it has changed the vision of Africans for the future development?
Thank you very much. Thank you, CGTN, for inviting us and for organizing this forum. I mean, the new challenge that we face as a continent and in our respective countries is a global challenge, which came to us where we were in the process of working together to really realize the transformation of our continent. Just to give you a sense of how this impacted on the transformation of our own country, by the end of 2019, our economic growth was 11.9%. It was double digit.
Probably one of the fastest in the world.
One of the fastest growing economies. And suddenly, because of this pandemic, the economy dived from the cliff to the negatives, below x-axis, to less than 2%. And this is the same situation in many other countries. But I think we should not be pessimistic. I think we should remain inspired by what our continent is doing in terms of saying, let's put in place effective measures to deal with the current challenge.
Mr. Ahonsi, I know that you've been serving as a UN resident coordinator, and coordination obviously is important for African continent. But do you share his optimism about Africans' coordination and cooperation in the economic front?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. What this pandemic presents to us is an opportunity to create a world of shared prosperity. The progress that China is making is critical to restoring normalcy to the global economy as a whole, and to trade and other relations with Africa. But the key thing is that as we come out of this crisis, we should not be seeking to going back to business as usual. In any case, it can no longer be business as usual. We're already talking about the next normal or the new normal. And we have to equip, in the way we manage China-Africa relations, we have to equip Africa to be better able to take advantage of the opportunities that will be provided by the next normal, including, for example, significant injection of investment into infrastructural development, into building the ICT capacities of African countries, and into strengthening the resilience of the health systems across Africa.
Leslie, you just came back from South Africa, I guess 6 weeks ago, but your country is still deeply troubled by COVID-19. How would you describe its resilience, and what has your country's decision makers come up with to deal with this?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I think it is important to look back and set the context, because COVID is a 2020 moment, if you like. It's important to understand that South Africa over the last 10 years have had very sort of stagnant growth of less than 1% compared to, Ambassador Chanaka will tell you that Ethiopia is growing at double digits, for example.
Yeah.
So South Africa, the starting point, the original conditions as we entered the COVID crisis.
But you are the most advanced economy before
exactly.
COVID now.
Exactly. The government and the public policy makers responded with speed to contain the public health crisis. There was a very early lockdown which deepened the economic crisis. As you know, many of our African economies are driven by small and medium-sized enterprises which were heavily affected, and large numbers of jobs have been lost. It's projected now that up to 1 million jobs would be lost in South Africa. The last time we lost 1 million jobs was in the 2008-2009 crisis.
But are they going to last forever, or just...
Very good question. Right now, there are a number of sectors where lasting damage will be done. As you would have heard from the number of colleagues here, different of the African countries have unique features which affects how their countries are responding to the pandemic. In South Africa's case, it deepened an already existing economic recession. This year, it's projected that, I was just speaking to Jeremy, who was the chief China economist here, that this year we projected to have negative growth of minus 8.5%.
8.5?
That is probably the worst in several generations in South Africa. Our budget deficit is going to be in double digits, again, the worst in about 28 years. So the conditions that we are faced with now looks bleak. But I do want to end off, though, with a very optimistic note. The ingredients for medium and long-term economic growth in the continent and what you call the African century are still very robust. We have a very strong demographic dividend. We have, as you've heard, we will have 2.5 billion people by 2050. The next 3 decades, we will have one of the central ingredients that many Southeast Asian economies had for their economic miracle. 2, the adoption of this and the potential that presents. The continent can leapfrog by the adoption of these technologies a lot of the developmental challenges which we are currently facing.
It's interesting that you talk about financing. So Jeremy, this is your area. What is your assessment of the disruptions caused by this COVID, and can financing be still viable in such a context?
Yeah, I mean, I first and foremost agree very much with what all the other panelists have said, particularly Leslie recently now about the economic situation. I think that COVID, if anything, COVID is a reminder to leaders that this is a clear litmus for your ability to manage a crisis, and you can be judged relative to other countries. And what we see is that poor decisions are being criticized aggressively, and a lot's at stake, so people's lives are at stake, and this matters in quite a profound way, obviously. And so what worries me about the outlook for Africa in the near term is we need to get the health crisis under control, and we need to do it in a way that doesn't cause significant amounts of destruction to jobs, employment, incomes, and so on. And it's a very difficult thing to do. And Africa has done relatively well so far, but most people suggest that COVID is going to peak later in Africa than anywhere else. And the problem is that emerging markets and many in Africa, the starting point is weaker. So the economic structure is less robust, they're more reliant on commodities, they're more indebted. But the real issue is the poverty, the inequality, the unemployment across the continent is problematic. And so people are angry, and people are likely to get more angry if they see institutions of the state, so the government, the legal system, accountability, all of those things prove to not be effective. So I think there's an underestimation of the civil dissatisfaction that could rise out of coronavirus and the frustration that people feel on the ground. As a result of that, I think that the critical thing is that governments, civil society, private companies have to get together and realize that we're all in this together. The global community, like a couple of colleagues have said, are also part of the solution. And we need to think proactively about how we're going to solve this problem. Now, the issue is that Africa, and like the two ambassadors said earlier, we've got long-term plans. Those are very, very important. That's the structural drivers for Africa's development over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. But this will drain resources. This will take attention from that. And so getting that right is going to be problematic. In terms of financing, what I would say is that as a result of that pressure and the importance of having the right policy put in place, I think things like ease of doing business, so countries focusing on how can we make it a more pro-business environment to attract investment, to attract private engagement in our economy, is very important. And so President Cyril Ramaphosa in South Africa, he last year said, you know, he wants South Africa to go from 82 to 50 in the rankings, and he set a list of the things that he would like to promote. I think that that's very important for across the continent to become more competitive. And to give context to that, so over the last 5 years, China's improved 20 points in its ease of doing business according to the World Bank. The only African country that compares as favorably is Kenya. There's been lots of progress in Ivory Coast, Rwanda, and so on, Ethiopia. And those are the economies that are growing the fastest in the world, right? So getting the detail right actually matters, and it's easier said than done.
Be it epidemic control or long-term economic development, it definitely needs the government to deliver good governance and a good relationship between businesses, civil society, and the government. I believe Ethiopia and Rwanda have done exemplary jobs in some areas. Could you please share with us why you've been doing well in the way that you did, and what can be learned from other countries in Africa?
I think why Ethiopia has been doing in the last 10-15 years has been doing, I think, a very good work. The first point, I think, is we have a very committed and a strong government that is development-oriented, people-centered, and focused. Second, we have defined what we call homegrown economic reform program, economic policy that suits the Ethiopian situation.
Okay.
In the past, as you might recall, that we have been policy prescribed from outside, and it did not work. So countries like Ethiopia, countries like Rwanda define their own policy and their strategy. They have set their own priorities. So we have been doing extremely well. The last 15 years, our economy grew at double digit, around 11.2. And that is when we met actually COVID-19. Now, Ethiopia continues to reform, political reform, economic reform, civil service reform, justice reform, business environment reform. And the top leadership has taken that responsibility very seriously. Secondly, Ethiopia was not alone in this process. We have partners, again, partners like China, partners like Europe, partners from other parts of the world. But in that partnership, of course, again, what is critical is what is your priority? So you want your partners to work with you in the priority you have defined. That was, again, a very key action that Ethiopia has taken. Secondly, we knew that we should start with agriculture. Without transforming agriculture, we knew that we cannot move to industry simply. So these are some of the key strategies and policies that we have adopted to ourselves. And then, of course, we realize that the government alone cannot do this. That's why we have opened up the country for foreign direct investment, and then we have given ample space for private investment domestically. So we have actually several economic actors joining hand and working with the government.
Very thankfully, our guest speakers have been providing insights towards African development, business environment, international organizations' role. But what is the difficulty and opportunity of Africa at this particular time from a journalist's point of view? I'd like to connect with our guest speaker, Mr. Eric Bigon, who is the news reporter of KBC TV. Let's talk to Eric. So Eric, what will be your question?
I would ask if, in their opinion, what do they think of the pandemic and Africa post-pandemic? Is what we are experiencing now likely to jeopardize the relationship that exists now between Africa and maybe China?
Mr. Mkhonsi, would you like to answer that question? How long gotta stay?
I'm happy to answer the question, and it's a very important question. I do think that the first thing is to see what is it that Africa can learn from China's experience in dealing with very rapidly containing and controlling the outbreak, and carefully opening up the economy and restoring normalcy. The whole initiative by G20, which China is also part of debt suspension, 2020, we hope it can be extended to 2021, debt service suspension, hopefully expanded even to debt relief, because we know one of the consequences of the adverse economic impact of the pandemic is to further worsen the indebtedness of many countries in Africa. Again, international action, solidarity, and cooperation is required, and China-African relations can be a big part of that solution of getting to debt sustainability, because as you know, China is the most significant bilateral donor to Africa, and many of these bilateral debts that we talk about, much of it is to China. So if we are to fix the problem of debt, China-Africa relations has to be a big part of that story. So we do, see that the way we work together, China and Africa and the rest of the world, in tackling this problem is key to how we get out of it and build back better.
Okay. I hope Mr. Alonsi's remarks answer your question, Eric. Thank you very much for your questions and your earlier messages from Kenya. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
But Mr. Alonsi, you mentioned international coordination and collaboration. There is a big caveat that is happening, that is the U.S.-China rivalry and tensions. How do Africans view the changing global geopolitics and geoeconomy? Will that have some bearings on Africa?
Well, not be called upon to make a choice. China is important for Africa. United States is also important for Africa. But the two largest economies are important for global economy, for global order. So our appeal has been that they should really sit around the table and try to address this challenge, because that will affect, I think, significantly. And I think we have seen something even during COVID-19. The two countries have not been working together. Had they worked together, I think we would have seen even a much better response to COVID-19. But the thing is that global trade is important. China and America are two largest trading partners, and of course two largest economies. So peaceful resolution of the trade dispute is important, and I think that is what we have been telling both sides, that they should really address this in a manner that both sides win. The global economy also wins.
But Ambassador Kimoyo, the reason I asked this, because earlier we talked about the upgrading of communication and electronics infrastructure in Africa. But that relies a lot on international cooperation, especially between China and the U.S. If you want to improve your communication infrastructure in Africa, can you do it without China and Africa, China and America on the same page? You have to choose a standard, you have to choose a technology, you have to choose a platform. If that is the case, well, it's a daunting challenge.
So, I mean, it's a very tricky question because from where I sit and from what I know, we have diverse type of technologies in our respective countries that are applied in different ways in health, in education, in agriculture, in transport, and they come from across the globe. You see, even physically we can say China is an entity, a standalone entity, US is a standalone entity, but in real terms, if you carry a mobile phone, or if you look at an aircraft, when you look at the components that make that aircraft or cell phone, are not necessarily from one single entity that I just mentioned. So in reality we are transacting, but the face of it we look like we are so different. So as my brother Ambassador mentioned, complementarity is critical. Bottom line, multilateralism is critical, cooperation among countries is critical. Whatever the differences are, it's very, very important to approach them with humility and find a solution, because technologies are created to address problems that face humanity. Today, as I speak, Rwanda's coverage in terms of 4G is about 95%, meaning that everybody in the country, in whichever corner of the country, has access to internet and mobile phone. So for us to look at technology as tools that come to address challenges, we are now able to deliver blood to the remotest part of Rwanda using drones. We are using robots to measure temperatures during COVID. We are using technologies to trace. We are using GPS to be able to determine, where the COVID cases are concentrated, to be able to establish control measures and lockdowns. So I think technology for me comes handy in terms of addressing the challenges that we have globally, and this makes me to believe that China and the US will be able to come around one table and say, at the end of the day, we are seeking solutions to the challenges that face humanity and facing all of us.
I hope both decision makers in Beijing and Washington again listen to what you just said. Let's run a video of a former health minister from Mali saying about what we're facing right now in terms of COVID.
Mental front, in economic front, we are seeing growing inequalities every single places. And coronavirus epidemic has been able to demonstrate that we are not ready, that we are not prepared, and to be able to respond to those changes, to be able to meet the Sustainable Development Goal in 10 years time from now is very important to engage young people, to make sure that the youth will be at the center of our transformation, to make sure that we build the bridge between Chinese young people and African young people. We should not forget that young people represent almost 50% of the total population of most of the places today, particularly in Africa. More than 80% are below 30 years old. So it is a forced transformation, and is important to use innovation. Innovation will be the key for more inclusive society. Innovation will be the key for certainly changing our setting, different setting, to be able to anticipate and to respond to the new world which is needed to emerge. In this world need to be built on unity between, of course, different parts of the world, but particularly between China and Africa. And I want to say that you are building already this path with all of us today.
Innovation, of course, is very important, especially for a young and ambitious continent like Africa. But Ms. He, to have a better internet speed and access in Africa, you need investment, you need the government commitment. If we are living in a post-COVID time, how can we ensure that those things will substantiate?
Yeah, I think as two ambassadors just mentioned, those experiences from China and Africa, maybe we can make some little conclusion. One is the strong leadership. Another is the very good policy suitable to your country. Suitable, I think this is the key words. Not like blind copy who and who, because the country, they have different national conditions. So like this digital economy, why Rwanda can take the lead? Because they have already found they themselves is a landlocked country. They don't have a harbor. Yeah, they don't have a big size like to make manufacturing industry. Even the railway cannot be established. This is called, you know, thousands of years country. Yeah, up and down, up and down. So, but the internet, yeah, those mountains, hills cannot prevent those signals. So very suitable for this country. And also Ethiopia, industrialization, that's the strategy. Yeah, they have been made. First, the 5-year plan for industrialization now has been finished, and then second plan, 5-year plan. So step forward. Because now they have exit, like to Djibouti, and even, you know, Prime Minister Abiy also got Nobel Peace Prize because it has done good relation with Eritrea. So those are, and also has an exit to the outside world. So they have been doing this. Recently I traveled to Djibouti. Djibouti, tiny country, so their suitable strategy is to develop a free trade zone. Yeah, they're learning from Dubai. They're not copying the strategy like China.
In your experience, do you think those countries in Africa have been smart enough to come up with, as you said, tailored policies for their own economies?
Tailored policy. You cannot just blindly copy anywhere. Like China, no country can copy. We have a big size here. We have lots of things that are different with Africa. So Dubai, they copy, they want to be, like Djibouti, they want to copy the successful story of Dubai. You're becoming, you know, the hub for linking Asia, Europe, and Africa. So this is the key. No matter you do what kind of thing, innovative, like Jack Ma has been doing this. Yeah, like Ambassador mentioned, need a partner. You cannot travel alone. Yeah, you travel alone, you cannot travel further. You need a partner. So this partner also can offer the things you need the most.
Thank you very much. On that note, we have to conclude this year's China-Africa Forum. Thank you, ambassadors. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, COVID-19 is a disruptor, but it could also be a corrector. So it won't stop Africa from developing. It won't stop China and Africa cooperating with each other. Let's cooperate to discover a new Africa. Thank you very much for joining this year's China-Africa Forum.